All right, so I wrote a book about love, which is one of the greatest challenges uh, because love is such a cliche attracting thing. It's like one of those, what is it? It's like a sweater and it attracts dog hair or something, or a whale and it attracts crustaceans or whatever all over it. So when you write about love, even love itself is a huge, huge cliche. When I say the word love, romantic, date, broken heart, your mind literally just tunes out. It's heard these things so many times. So I wrote this book, Things I Would Like to Do With You. The proof is in the pudding. It's been a best-selling book. And that's despite almost no distribution because we went independent. So I'm just going to talk about how I wrote it and how I edited it so that it could be successful. And by successful, I don't just mean copy sold. I mean actually connecting with people's minds and hearts in a way that hopefully was helpful to them a little bit. And the point of this is not to toot my own horn at all, because I'm obviously a colossal, as my dad likes to remind me, I'm kidding. But to help you write a book that connect with people and sell some copies. So I started writing this without thinking it was a book, number one. I've had big ideas for books, big ideas for titles. You probably have ideas for books and titles in your mind. Forget them. They will mess up your entire writer career. Forget your titles particularly. Your ideas are one thing. So just let the idea, just write it out and don't self-censor. Don't even worry about self-editing too much. Just write your ideas out, and but also really focus on what I did. I had so many pent-up ideas and failed novels in me that I actually picked a topic that I knew would be fun to write about and easy to write, and it was called Eco Boy versus Yoga Girl. And I've actually never published it, but I wrote pretty much this entire book, and it was just really fun, and it just got me loosened up. It's almost like you're constipated as a writer with your writer's block or your big ideas. Your big ideas are the bane of writers often because you get fixated on them and nothing you write lives up to them. So you constantly hate your own writing because it's not living up to the great American novel kind of idea you have in your head. So I wrote this Eco Boy versus Yoga Girl, which was super Portlandia-ish and funny and talking about this unhealthy dynamic between a couple. And the cover had like Godzilla versus whatever, Wombat or something on it. And then I felt like I was ready. So I went on this date. I was super inspired about something. I came back. I wrote this story. I didn't even think of it as a chapter. And the reaction was so strong. So first of all, I recommend that you serialize whatever you're writing on a blog, whether it's your own blog, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Elephant Journal, Huffington Post, whatever. I obviously encourage you to write on your own blog or Elephant Journal or some independent entity, unlike Huffington or Facebook or whatever that are more corporate backed. But wherever you can find an audience or build an audience, right there. And then as you do it, you can use that to build up your social media following and your pre-orders for the book. But that's another conversation. I've done that video and we can link it in the description, please. So here I just serialized it. So I put out chapter after chapter, and with Elephant, I had the lucky situation where I had friends who were editors on staff and they were inspired by it too. And they volunteered to edit it before I put it up, and they would find really obvious things, like things I would take for granted in my mind that made sense, but I hadn't explained them. So they were edited lightly and then put up. So I had a sort of peer editing situation. Then I put them up, then I got feedback from the public. And if I was off, they would call that out, but more often because it was going well, they would highlight in their comments what they appreciated about it. And that actually helped me just as much as constructive criticism, because then I knew when I was on the right track or the wrong track. So that's a very helpful process. Then when all the chapters, I eventually had 35 chapters or blogs, I put them together in some document, I forget, some Google Doc or something. And I had a whole bunch of editors editing different chapters, friends of mine, great writers. Marette Mueller was one of them. And Lindsay Block on Elephant was one of them. And eventually she just wound up taking over after like 5 or however many chapters. Everyone was doing one chapter at a time. And Lindsay just, you'll sort of winnow down naturally to someone who is inspired enough to put up with and edit your BS or my BS long term. And you really need one person looking at it consistently because they have knowledge of the beginning, the middle, and the end, and it all has to flow. My book went through 4 seasons. So that's my recommendation, is to start with a whole bunch of friends, develop a little book circle. If you ask people, hey, would you be willing to read my stuff and tell me what you really think, good and bad. Good is just as valuable as bad. A lot of people think editing is all bad, like change this, do this, this is horrible. And that's super important, especially getting rid of cliche. So the final thing I wanted to note was that some chapters came out just perfectly and flowed, and you know, there's this quality where you read your own writing and you're kind of impressed. You're like, wow, that was great. But it almost feels like you're not writing. And a lot of writers throughout history have talked about that feeling. It feels like it's just going through you. And that's beautiful. And then you can edit it lightly and you're good to go. But other chapters, and at least half my chapters were like this, come out and the idea is great, but they're just completely caged in by cliche and difficult writing that's not totally working, and moments of greatness and then awfulness. And basically, if you published them, I would be embarrassed to be me forever, because you're writing about your heart, your vulnerability, your love, in this case, of things, and you're doing it awfully. So in case you feel like there's been any bragging going on, half of things was god awful and may still be awful. And if you buy it, I apologize if you think it's awful. But the great process that I had was, those are the chapters where I really depended on Lindsay and other people to read it and really help it through. And so you have to find someone who's incredibly patient with your clumsiness and your BS, but at the same time is willing to call it out and kind of nurture it, because some chapters are like difficult births, you know, and you really have to be attentive to them to get them to a place where the good seed, the good part in it, will kind of come to fruition. All right, I hope that was helpful, and good luck.